26 years, $5 billion, 2.3 million stone blocks. That is what it took to build the single most expensive real estate project in human history. A tomb, not a palace, not a fortress, a burial chamber for one man who would occupy it for exactly 0 days of his living reign. When the God King approved the largest capital expenditure the ancient world had ever witnessed, his finance ministers had no idea they were lighting a fuse. The treasury was flush, the labor force was organized, the stone was free. What could possibly go wrong? Everything. Because this was not just a construction project. This was the opening move in a 500-year Ponzi scheme that would drain the Egyptian economy dry and collapse an empire that had stood for 1,000 years. Around 2,600 years before the Common Era, the God King decided he needed a legacy project. Not the God King as a metaphor, the God King as official state policy. His name was Khufu, pharaoh of the 4th dynasty, chief executive of the wealthiest agrarian economy on the African continent, and he had inherited something extraordinary from his father: a functional pyramid. His father had built 3 pyramids trying to perfect the formula, each one larger, each one smoother. By the time the old man was buried, the engineering problems were solved. Khufu looked at those pyramids and saw an opportunity. If his father could build 3 mediocre monuments, he could build one that would dwarf them all. This was not vanity. This was brand strategy. In ancient Egypt, the size of your tomb determined your credibility in the afterlife. And credibility in the afterlife translated directly to political legitimacy in this life. Every farmer who saw that pyramid rising on the plateau understood one message: the king is not just powerful, the king is inevitable. The economic conditions were perfect. Egypt controlled the Nile controlled the harvest controlled the workforce. For 3 months every year, when the river flooded the farmland, 20,000 men had nothing to do. The state mobilized them, paid them in grain, beer, and prime beef, housed them in purpose-built barracks, gave them medical care. This was not slave labor. This was a jobs program with a divine mission attached. The workforce was so proud of their assignments that they graffitied their team names inside the monument. The Friends of Khufu gang, the Vigorous gang, the Drunkards of Menkaure. These men believed they were building eternity. They had no idea they were building a financial time bomb. The logistics alone should have bankrupted the project before the foundation was laid. This was not a construction site. This was an industrial supply chain stretched across 600 miles of desert and river. Start with the stone. 2.3 million blocks. The bulk limestone came from quarries 400 meters south of the site. Free real estate. But the casing stones, the white Tura limestone that would make the pyramid shine like polished silver, had to be shipped across the Nile from quarries 10 miles away. 10 miles does not sound catastrophic until you realize each barge carried stones weighing 2.5 tons per block. Then there was the granite, 8,000 tons of it, quarried at Aswan, 560 miles upstream. The logistics teams loaded granite blocks weighing up to 80 tons onto wooden barges and floated them down the Nile during flood season, when the water was high enough to carry the weight. The shipping cost alone for moving that granite would run $15 million per year in modern terms. And that does not include the copper tools wearing out every week, the wooden sledges cracking under the weight, or the ropes snapping and crushing workers beneath falling stone. The human cost was measurable in compressed spines and shattered bones. Archaeologists examining worker skeletons found severe degenerative arthritis in the lower backs and knees, fractures in arms and legs that had healed with splints. These men were not just working. They were being systematically depreciated as human assets. But the state kept them fed. 4,000 pounds of meat slaughtered every single day. Cattle, sheep, goats. The catering budget alone would cost $150 million annually in modern money. Add in the grain for bread, the barley for beer, the fish from the Nile, and you are looking at an operational expense that consumed a significant percentage of the national grain surplus. For 26 years straight. No interruption, no corner cutting. This was a fixed cost burning through the treasury while the God King waited for his eternal retirement home to be finished. The pyramid was completed. The God King was eventually buried. The project was declared a success. And that is when the real financial disaster began. Because the Egyptians did not build monuments and walk away. They built mortuary cults. Permanent institutions staffed by priests whose job was to maintain the tomb and perform rituals for the deceased king in perpetuity. These cults were funded by estates granted tax-exempt status, farmland that would generate revenue forever but contribute zero taxes to the central government. Khufu started the trend. His successors accelerated it. Every powerful official at court wanted the same deal. Build a tomb, establish a mortuary cult, get your estate exempted from taxes. By the 6th dynasty, a massive portion of the most productive agricultural land in Egypt had been removed from the fiscal base. The treasury was supporting an expanding class of priests and temple workers while collecting taxes from a shrinking pool of farms. This was not sustainable. This was a sovereign wealth transfer from the productive economy to a non-productive religious bureaucracy. The treasury adapted by squeezing the remaining taxable estates harder, which made provincial governors more independent and resentful. They started keeping more revenue for themselves, building their own tombs in their own territories instead of near the royal pyramids, raising their own armies. The central authority was fracturing. And then the climate turned. Around 2,200 years before the Common Era, a mega-drought hit Northeast Africa. For decades, the Nile floods were weak. Crop yields collapsed. Famine spread. The state could not respond because the treasury was already drained from centuries of tax-exempt mortuary estates. The Old Kingdom did not collapse in a single dramatic event. It bled out over 150 years. By the end of the 6th dynasty, Egypt had fragmented into rival provinces ruled by warlords. The capital at Memphis was abandoned. The royal treasury, known as the White House, sat empty. Pyramid construction stopped entirely for 2 centuries. The dynasty had spent itself into oblivion funding the afterlife industry. The final audit is brutal. The God King spent $5 billion in modern terms to build a structure that generated zero economic return. No trade routes secured, no defensive advantage gained, no agricultural productivity increased. Just a pile of stone holding an empty sarcophagus. The pyramid was looted within centuries. The white casing stones were stripped for other buildings. The capstone vanished. What remains today is the exposed core, 8 meters shorter than the original design, missing 1,000 tons of material from the peak. But the true cost was not the $5 billion spent on construction. The true cost was the fiscal precedent it established. Tax-exempt mortuary estates, permanent priestly salaries, dynasty after dynasty replicating the model until the treasury could no longer function. Economists call this rent-seeking behavior. The ancient Egyptians called it honoring the gods. Either way, it drained the state dry. This was not unique to ancient Egypt. This was the same pattern that plays out in every economy where prestige projects receive perpetual subsidies with no accountability. Compare it to modern vaporware tech startups that burn billions in venture capital funding to build platforms nobody uses. Or government defense contracts that run 300% over budget and deliver weapons systems that do not work. Or abandoned real estate megaprojects in China, ghost cities built with borrowed money that will never generate revenue. The names change, the currency changes, the scam stays the same. Spend other people's money on a monument to your vision. Let someone else deal with the bill. The pyramid still stands. The dynasty that built it does not. That is the return on investment. The God King wanted immortality. He got a tomb that tourists pay $20 to enter for 15 minutes. His kingdom wanted divine glory. It got a 2-century dark age of famine and civil war. The cost was $5 billion, and the productive capacity of an entire civilization, redirected toward a project that benefited no one except the man who would never see it completed. The pyramid endures because stone lasts longer than empires. But the lesson is carved deeper than any hieroglyph. Ambition without fiscal discipline does not build legacies. It builds ruins. If you enjoy this video, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss our next investigation into the world's greatest megastructures. And which ancient project deserves a financial audit next? Tell us in the comments below.